Hey, this is Molly. Before I introduce you to today's guest, I'm thrilled to tell you about an unbelievable event on May 5th that I am super excited to be a part of. Broadcast live from Atlanta to 100,000 people around the globe, LeaderCast Live is the largest one-day leadership event in the world. Join me and an incredible lineup: Tyler Perry, Andy Stanley, Daniel Pink, and Susie Welch, just to name a few. Again, it's on May 5th, and it's a day of leadership development. To learn more about how you and your team can attend or host a live simulcast, visit leadercast.com. Welcome to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher, where we take you behind the scenes with peak performers to learn what makes them tick and discover how you can apply their lessons to your life. I'm your host, Molly Fletcher. Today's guest turned her passion and purpose into a vision, leading the launch of the espnW platform for ESPN. Laura Gentile is Senior Vice President at ESPN, overseeing the espnW brand and women's initiatives. She previously served as the Chief of Staff at ESPN, working directly with ESPN and ABC Sports President George Bodenheimer, and helping bring the ESPN brand to the ABC television platform. She's a graduate of Duke University, where she was an All-American in field hockey and team captain, and earned her MBA from Boston College's Carroll Graduate School of Management. Laura takes us behind the scenes to talk about the culture at ESPN, her vision for espnW, and what she's learned from some of the sport's biggest stars. Follow her on Twitter at Laura, LOO23, and follow at espnW on Twitter and Instagram. Please welcome Laura. It is awesome to have you on. Thank you so much for taking a minute. I know how busy you are in the sports world, that's for sure. So thanks. ESPN and sort of obviously sports is pretty male dominated. And I've also had a journey in that lane. And so here you are, right, launching espnW. I mean, I think you launched the platform, right? What was that process like? And how did you do that internally? And was there pushback? I just wanted to kind of understand how that started.
Yeah, no, it was truly a startup. We truly had an idea and a vision for creating a platform specifically for women, built specifically for women who love sports. And it truly was an entrepreneurial venture within our company. Every step of the way, we had to earn credibility, we had to earn respect, we had to prove our business plan and our model. And we've grown from 5 people that started ESPnW to now we have over 50 people, touching the business on a regular basis and thinking about our future and thinking about how to serve women more deeply. So it was a bit of a leap of faith, to propose this business and to say, hey, women matter and we need to do more to serve them. But it was also very logical to me. We see a lot of data, 49% of all sports fans in the U.S. are women. That's 115 million people. That's a huge potential audience. And ESPN serves a percentage of those women already, but there's a larger audience and a larger universe to be served and engaged and to fall in love with us. So that's the opportunity was so large, it got me super excited, and ultimately it didn't feel like a leap of faith. It just almost seemed like an imperative, like we had to pursue this.
Sure. And so how did you, this was a startup, right? I mean, like you said, this was no different than starting a business, right? You had to sort of create financial projections, and you probably had to do all kinds of things that we all do when we start a business. Tell me a little bit more about kind of tactically, how did you do it? And how did you overcome sort of maybe the naysayers and the negative voices that maybe said, I don't really know if there's a market for this. I hear you, there's 115 million people and women, right? How did you do that, right? We have so many young women that listen to this podcast and they run into roadblocks every day in their lives, whatever they might be, gender specific or not. How have you overcome, maybe it was with starting espnW or others? How have you done that?
Sure. Well, part of it is being resolute, right? Part of it is just sort of mental toughness and a sense that there's no way this is going to fail. Like, I'm not even going to think about failure. I'm really just going to go after it, and we're going to make this happen. So part of it is being super focused and resolute. And then, of course, a huge part of it is those first 5 people that I hired, they had to be extraordinary. You know, they had to be versatile, that they could work across lots of disciplines. They also had to be resolute. They also had to get excited about the unknown and being on a startup. So those first five people were super key in that I had somebody leading my sales effort who also had a huge say in product and was super interested in research and analytical. And I hired a social media person out of the gate because I knew we had to have a pretty prominent voice across social media where millions of women already are. And having women who were super nimble and believed in the opportunity and just had incredible work ethic, I mean, that was a key starting point. And then every year, kind of making it our goal to do something really distinctive, to surprise people, to show them the bigness of the opportunity, to demonstrate that we were really creative. So it took us a couple years to really get our foundation set and to get our content vision sorted out and to make the website sing. But every year we did something that caught our executives' eyes and showed that we had momentum and showed that we think differently and are doing things differently. You know, we launched with a conference, with the ESPnW Summit.
Right.
And our company typically doesn't even do conferences. And that's how we launched our business. And the summit has only grown in scope and in content depth and its position in the industry ever since. But that in itself was a pretty gutsy way to launch a business here.
Sure. Yeah, that's not necessarily how ESPN launched, was it, by doing an event?
Yeah, I mean, it's a different time and a different age, but we wanted to make a statement to say we're here and we're committed and we're going to galvanize as many women in the industry as we possibly can.
So what's your vision for ESPnW? I mean, where do you see it in 5 years or 10 years?
Well, part of it is continuing to grow that brand and positioning it in a way that young women really understand that this is a platform built for them, where their accomplishments can be heralded, where female athletes are in the spotlight, where we tell great stories and we're really tailoring content to them. But then more importantly, perhaps, is just helping ESPN evolve, where ESPN is more inclusive, is serving women even more deeply than we are today, really is this sports brand that is synonymous with serving all sports fans and giving a voice to women in an even more prominent way than we do today. So it's continuing to grow W as a platform that's super attractive to a certain segment of women while driving ESPN to embrace all fans even more so.
Mm-hmm. Well, and before we came on, you talked a little bit about just kind of the evolution of sports, right? And the role that women play in that evolution. Tell me a little bit more about that, and I'm sure you've pulled and have access to a ton of data around that. Who spends the money and all that kind of stuff. But I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we've all seen the statistics that talk about the increased spending power of women. There's incredible statistics that in the U.S., women spend over $10 trillion annually. And now we influence over 85% of all household purchasing decisions.
Wow.
I mean, these are huge
Right.
numbers. And the idea is to really tap into that power and think about it through the lens of sports and how we can engage those women completely. But we see it in everything that we're doing is the growing influence of women. Our voices are gaining in strength. More and more women in the senior executive levels.
Mm-hmm.
It's not where we want it to be for sure, and it's far from equitable. But there are definitely signs of strength and leadership and continued growth on that front.
Well,
and sports is no different. You know, you see women coaching,
right.
You see women in the front office,
right.
You see women more and more doing play-by-play. Again, it's not where we want it to be, but there are certainly bright lights that are showing us what the future is going to be.
Well, no, I agree with you. And one question I'd love to ask you is, I, as you know, from my past life, was a sports agent for almost 20 years. And one of the questions I often get is, when do we think women athletes and or coaches are going to get paid like men? And maybe I'm wrong. I've always wondered, I think it's when the sponsorship dollars and the TV catches up to that. But how would you answer that question? I'd love to know. And I'm answering it out of my gut with no stats or data around it. How would you answer that?
No, I mean, you're right. I mean, there are examples, right, in tennis for sure, with Serena Williams and Maria Sharapova, where they're truly making certainly equal wages when it comes to tournaments, the Grand Slams, and on the sponsorship endorsement front. But that's the gold standard, right? Tennis is sort of the gold standard for women and equity. Team sports has a long way to go, right? We need to get to a point that we have really healthy, successful professional leagues. And you're right, that takes investment. And it's not only a sponsorship issue, it's really sort of a management ownership issue. You look at owners of NHL, NBA, NFL franchises. Those are long-term investments. They're a point of pride. They're family-owned for 80, 90 years. They're super important assets. And women's professional team sports doesn't have that level of investment or commitment yet. Mm-hmm. And I think it's more the ownership league structure before you can ask sponsors to really commit and just take a flyer on some of these things.
Got it. Well, now, so switching gears a little bit, we talk on the show a lot about purpose. And tell me, how have you, I know you've, I'm sure, have a very clear purpose on why you do the work that you do. How have you been able to align kind of your purpose in the work that you do with what you do?
Well, as it relates to espnW, it's been really natural for me. I grew up as an athlete, playing 3 sports in high school, total tomboy, playing with the guys in the neighborhood, and then, getting a scholarship to play field hockey at Duke. And just being around sports and being an athlete has always defined me, and it's always been a part of my DNA. So I didn't immediately go from playing field hockey at Duke to ESPnW. There was, a whole host of experiences in between, going to business school, working in advertising and marketing, working as a chief of staff for our president at ESPN. There's a whole host of experiences that gave me more and more expertise. But at the end of the day, I look at myself as an athlete and as a woman who's always loved sports and could talk sports. And it's just, it just is a passion point. So helping build a business like ESPnW and understanding the trials and tribulations of female athletes and the attention we don't get and the fact that we play for the love of the game and it's really, really pure has really helped incredibly in believing in ESPnW and wanting to build it because it's so in alignment with who I am as a person. Sure.
Well, no, I can relate. I was climbing trees too, girl. And I think we graduated at about the same time. So, so the sports space and the sports business space specifically is so fast paced, right? And you're in an industry, obviously, and in a space specifically, it's 24/7. I mean, it is absolutely 24/7. How do you, and are a mother, right? How do you manage your energy? How do you do that?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, it also goes back to being an athlete. I think there's a certain resiliency, there's a certain knowledge of your body, there's a certain work ethic, and there's a certain stamina that comes from having been an athlete. Like when you get tired or you lose focus, you take a deep breath and you refocus.
Right.
So I think the way that I approach work is, again, through an athletic mindset, But I also think I have gotten better over the years at prioritizing and focusing on the most important thing in the moment, coming into work knowing the 3 to 5 things I have to get done today and being laser focused on those things, and just really being turned on by what I do. You know, I think that enthusiasm, that positivity, that passion really gives you that extra boost of energy and enables you to sort it all out. When you have, I have 2 sons, and I actually have a third on the way. And I think it's a matter of, like you said, manage your energy, but being, I hate to use the cliche of being present, but it's true. Like when I'm at work, I'm really at work. And yeah, there might be some personal things that I have to take care of here and there, but I really try to focus. I don't chit chat. I don't kind of while my time away.
Sure.
And then when I'm home, I'm pretty locked into my sons and what's up and having a football catch and talking to them and being there for them. So it is kind of this constant shift of energy, but I think it's all done at a pretty high energetic level.
Well, and I would assume, I mean, one of the things that I know I personally struggle with, and that I know a lot of women do, successful women, CEOs, leaders that I get the opportunity to connect with, is saying no, right? I mean, how do you do that? How do you learn? How have you managed to, I think one of the hardest things for women is just to say no, right? Because, and my line is always sort of when we say no, we say yes to hopefully the things that matter most in our lives. But how have you been able to do that? And what do you think gave you the strength to probably say no more often?
Yeah, it's not easy, but I think ultimately it goes back to what your priorities are. And so you have your priorities in line. You know the imperatives at work. You know what you have to get done this day, this week, this year. And then at home, you know what's important to you and the time you want to spend. Everything else kind of gets filtered out. Right. Believe me, there's more things I'd like to do. There's more work in the community I'd like to do. There's more volunteer things I'd like to do. There's more things I'd like to do with my alma maters. You kind of figure it out, and everything has its place, and every year is different, so it's not always a finite decision. You could take that up the following year, or you can kind of have a little bit more flow to what your priorities are. So I think I try to look at it long term. Like right now, I'm in aspiring executive young mom mode, and so I'm trying to funnel everything through those lenses.
Sure. Yeah, no, sure. But I find that it's such a common thing, but I agree with you totally. I think it's about getting clear on your priorities, and then the byproduct of the yes and no's you create against those priorities creates the balance, hopefully, that you're going for in your life,
Yeah, and I think the other thing is ideally you get to a place where we are now with ESPnW, where we have an incredible team. I mean, we have the strongest team we've ever had, so we have really capable people that can take on maybe a lot of the work that, 4 or 5 years ago I felt like I had to do it all myself or do it with less support. And so we have excellent people on the business side. We have excellent people in content and on the editorial side, and a lot of people with operational expertise. So all of that, makes my job easier and enables me to focus. So I think, too, if you're a manager, again, it's always trying to surround yourself with really capable, smart people.
Oh, yeah. No question. I tell you, I mean, I looked at, the best coaches in the world have a great bench of great, strong assistant coaches or captains on their team. It makes their lives a lot easier. That's for sure.
Right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. One of the things I wanted to ask you is you've sat in the room, I'm sure, with some incredible athletes and certainly, obviously, some amazing business people, some great executives. What are some things that you've learned in those moments, as you've built relationships, I'm sure, with some of these kind of folks? What have you learned? How do you apply that to your life? And what advice would you have for the people that are listening about the things that you've learned in those moments?
Well, some of the best leaders I've witnessed are really down to earth and really accessible and really humble. They're people. They're real people. And
Right.
They're not on a pedestal. They're not untouchable. So I think I've learned a lot from that because I believe sometimes you you think of a CEO or a president or any type of leader as, gosh, they have some special sauce that I'll never have, or they were born that way. And I think the more you're exposed to great leaders, you start to realize they just work really, really hard and really have incredible belief in what they're doing and in themselves. And they're really great at empowering others and getting the most out of others. So some of the most successful and impressive leaders to me have really opened themselves up to their people and are really honest and are really try to be an equal.
Sure.
And try to be on the level of their employees and their staff, and are just really have a lot of integrity and honesty.
Right. Well, and so kind of along those lines, what's the culture like, right? So many people that are listening go, ESPN, right? Those 4 letters that are so cool, and it's just this amazing place, right? What is, what's the culture like there?
It's very hard driving and demanding. I mean, it's what I like about it. It's a competitive place. We're always thinking about the future. The fact that our products are available 24/7, whether it's our networks or, of course, our websites or our mobile apps, like we're a 24/7 place. So right there, it just speaks to the energy level, and it speaks to the round-the-clock nature. I know there's very few businesses now that are 9 to 5, but very few businesses also have content being created 24/7 every day of the week, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, Hanukkah, every holiday.
Sure.
And so it never stops. So it is demanding, and you need to be very, very good at your job, and you need to be flexible and nimble. It rarely is a case where you could say, oh, I'm completely off today and I'm not touching that. You just have to love what you do so much that you're okay with that kind of mentality. But it's hard working, hard driving, but also very team oriented. We make a lot of decisions as a team. We talk a lot across departments. So it's also very collaborative. As somebody who's played on a lot of teams, I really appreciate the culture of ESPN that is so people and team oriented.
Sure. Well, and so, I am obviously a huge fan of youth sports and the impact that it can have on kids and the impact that it can have as it relates to character. I believe that character is directly associated with winning. If the higher character, across the board as we age in life, I think in a business environment, character aligns with winning. What, and when I think about the platform that sports can create for kids, young girls and young boys, to me, it's just remarkably powerful. But simultaneously, we're living in a world where there's a really high level of intensity around youth sports today. And, we see it, I'm sure you do, I do, with my girls who are 13 and 14. The intensity on the sidelines from parents is at times candidly shocking. And I worry about the kids. What role do you and is ESPN playing in regards to helping to support and get us to that place where we, are re-rooted in the benefits of youth sports and the byproduct of the opportunity to learn to compete, to recover, to embrace change, to be a part of a team, and how that can impact us in our work lives, right? Because very few, less than 1%, are ever going to really do it at another level, right, than they are from 0 to 18, right?
Right.
How do you see ESPN's role in that? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we've taken to heart at ESPnW. We have a sports parenting section now on W within our Voices vertical, and it has been hugely popular for us. I mean, we did not launch it with a lot of fanfare, but to your point, we realized that there's a big need out there, whether it's through our formal research or anecdotally. We just feel all the pressure on youth sports, from parents trying to figure it out, to parents putting the pressure on their kids, to kids feeling like, I don't know, I'm playing this sport and it's demanding. I'm not even sure if I love it.
Right.
And so we started this section where we're having parents write for us and talking about the balancing act and talking about being a parent new to travel sports and what that all means. And it's really been revelatory. So I think there's a lot more we can do in this space. We only launched our parenting section, I want to say last fall.
Okay.
And like I said, based on the returns and based on the interest, there are so many avenues that you could take this. But I'm with you. There is a lot of built-in pressure now on the youth sports level, and I feel it as a mom of an 8-year-old playing hockey, like tryouts and spring tryouts and winter tryouts and what team should we go with and what travel team should we go with and how much should we devote our weekend to it. And he's 8. It's like
right.
crazy, right? It's like he's not even 18. He's 8.
Or the pressure to play on certain team. I mean, I remember Schmaltzy, John Schmaltz was a client of mine forever, used to tell parents of young baseball players who were so worried about what travel team to play on and what's the right choice. And John would say, look, if your son is good and special, they will find him. Don't worry. You know, he will get found. And so where he wants to play, where he's going to have the most fun and grow the most, put him there, which was cool. So last question. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's true. You want to maintain that fun because that's why we all played. And the recruiting piece has gotten so front and center. I mean, you just try to, again, put it in perspective. It's not about the letter of intent. It's not about the Division I scholarship. It's about ideally learning all those amazing things we've all learned from playing sports and having a great time. And if it leads someplace, awesome. But just sort of enjoying sort of every season and every game for what it is.
Sure.
But it's hard to do right now.
Yeah, no, it is. But I think if you sort of stop and say, okay, wait, this is about my kids, right? And this other young person that they're playing, growing and evolving, and it's not about me, which can be hard, right? Because we want our kids to win, we think. Although I would say I probably learned more from I played tennis, the tennis matches I lost than I won. So last question, and then we do this really fun, cool rapid fire deal, which is great. But, you and I'm sure, I know I've gotten a lot of these questions get asked, I want to break into the sports industry. It's so fun. I'm such a big sports fan and I love the business side, et cetera, from young people and maybe sometimes older people. What do you tell them? What advice do you give people that want to get into the sports space?
So you have to build up expertise. You can't just say I'm a sports fan and I love sports. You have to be a great writer. You have to be great at marketing. You have to be a great accountant. You have to be a great content creator. I look at all the people who are succeeding here at ESPN. They have incredible expertise. They're an ace lawyer, and then they got into the sports industry. Or they're an excellent marketer, and they joined ESPN because they love sports, but that was sort of added value. So you have to build up an expertise. And I think too many people rely on, again, their affinity for sports as opposed to what are you really going to offer this company? How can you distinguish yourself in your discipline? And how can you move the business forward? And how can you make a difference for the company versus I just love sports and I love athletes and I want to be around it.
Right.
So, really building up your skill set and being very intentional and specific about it.
That's cool. I haven't really heard that quite said that way. I love that. And I couldn't agree with you more, right? I mean, when people call or used to, and I'm just such a big fan, I can name every stat. I know every guy, girl out there. The athletes, they don't, it's not about being a fan, right? It's about serving them from a business perspective.
Right.
So totally dig that advice.
Believe it. It makes it much more enjoyable that you are a fan and you get to experience this every day, and that's the content you're focused on. But that's not how you get in the door.
Right, right. Actually, it's a great way to get out the door if you say you're a fan. So I want to hit with these rapid fire questions because it's just a fun thing. And I guess my ask to you is just rattle off what comes to mind, whatever that might be. Just fire, right? And so we're going to roll through, I don't know, about 10 or so and just fire off what comes up for you, okay?
Okay.
All right, one word to describe yourself.
Happy.
Cool. One word others would use to describe you.
Authors?
Others.
Others. Oh, driven?
Nice. What's your biggest fear?
Oh, I hate that question. Biggest fear.
We all have them. It's okay.
A fiery plane crash.
Ooh, okay. What's your favorite book?
Oh, it's not my favorite, but I just read the 4 books by Elena Ferranti, and she's a writer, an Italian writer, and my mom's maiden name is Ferranti, but she's like all the rage, and I somehow, even though I never have time to read, I read all 4 of her latest books in a row.
Wow. What are they about?
It's about 2 friends growing up in Naples, Italy, and it's essentially their lifelong journey as friends. So it starts when they're in elementary school and ends when they're in their 60s.
Oh, neat. All right, I'm gonna get them. Sounds good. For somebody as busy as you, to rattle through 4 is pretty impressive. It must be good.
Yeah, no, I was like very proud of myself. It's
right.
Probably the first set of books I've read in a long time.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so besides ESPNW or ESPN, what's your favorite social media channel?
I probably spend the most time on Facebook, but I really do like Instagram.
Okay. What's a hidden talent that nobody would know?
Hidden talent? I can throw a football pretty well.
I bet, girl. Now, can you throw it as well as Brady did the other day in the Super Bowl?
No, definitely not.
Oh, my gosh. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Well, my mom likes to tell me, because she thinks, of course, like all moms, that you work too hard and you're too committed and you're too this. So she always would tell me, no one's indispensable. The company will live on. The day will, the sun will rise. And I just think it's a good way to keep you grounded. Sometimes we take ourselves way too seriously and we think our every move is so important. And, she just reminds me once in a while, no one is indispensable.
Sure. Wow. Well, that moms kind of do that, don't they? Moms just kind of keep us really grounded. They're really good at that. But that's a good thing. What would you say so far, and I mean you're young, your greatest accomplishment?
Well, certainly launching a media platform like ESPNW and creating that from scratch. And then, closer to home, it's pretty awesome being a mom and having 2 young sons, and I love that part of life too. Sure.
Yeah, amen. What's your favorite perk of the job? I mean, I'm sure you get to do some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, it's the idea that everything we do revolves around sports and sporting events. So some of the incredible events I've been able to go to, whether it's the Super Bowl or Women's World Cups, those have been pretty incredible.
Sure. And last one, what's your life motto?
Life motto? Make the most of it.
Nice.
I really think about that, trying to make your mark, but making the most of the one life you're given and really trying to focus on what's important to you and making a discernible difference.
Sure. Well, you're doing that, and that's why we wanted to have you on. This is, we call this the Game Changer podcast, and you're certainly that. So that's why we wanted to have you on, and there's no question you're doing that. So thanks for what you do. Thank you so much for what you do for women's sports, for young girls. I know that you inspire so many people in the sports space, and particularly you do an amazing job for young women, and so thank you for sort of paving the way. It's awesome.
Thank you, Molly. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks, as always, for listening. And if you missed an episode, you can listen to previous episodes on iTunes or on mollyfletcher.com. Until next time, stay curious and be a game changer.